see his eyes
Yeah,
smiling.
so
And
excited.
so I got kind of sidetracked with me. I was like, I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at anything that's happening in the meeting. I'm like, I just was pleased with what I just saw. I just saw a kid and he's happy, he's excited. So it was pretty cool.
Reverend Mack, when you're ready to start the meeting, you can.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and call the special call meeting to order. Entertain a motion for an adoption of the agenda, just so everyone will know that I will be doing voice voting today. So entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Darby, second by Mr. Garrett. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Mr. Hollenshed,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Mr. Garrett,
Yes.
Ms. Darby,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Ms. Jeffries,
Yes.
that motion carries. At this time now, we'll have an update regarding the online and in-person enrollment. Dr. Postwick?
Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to start by telling you that K-8 principals and teachers this week have had a wonderful week with children coming back for LEAP week. They've enjoyed themselves immensely, and those of us who've had a chance to be in schools a day or two have celebrated children coming back into our schools. That's been a lot of fun. We thank the principals and teachers for all of the advanced work that they did, and at the high school level, getting the schedules out to students, even though we had some glitches, they worked their way through it. And I think we're all excited about starting next week. I also know that there's probably a lot of anxiety about what in the world are we going to talk about this morning. So I want to get right to that. We have a point in our enrollment where we have two extremes. And I want to sort of walk through how we got to that point. We have more children who registered for Virtual Academy than we anticipated, and we have fewer children who registered for in-person than we anticipated. But we're not technically within the metrics that the board set last week. So I want to sort of just walk through how we got here. On July 27th, the board approved for us to have up to 25% of our children come back. And the board wanted to wait an additional 10 days because in July, COVID-19 rates were extremely high. We had a day with, I think, 959 cases per 100,000. And so the board did wait. Cases came way down. On August 10th, then, the board said it was fine to work with schools to increase that 25% number of students coming back in. But teachers came for their work week the next day because there wasn't really time for principals to do a lot of work to get ready, to change any schedules. And in some instances, schools made an informed decision to keep it at a low number so that they could start the first 2 weeks, open up slowly, make sure that their safety protocols were working, and then expand the number of students. So on August 24th, it was clear that the community really wanted some metrics, wanted to know what measures we'd be using. So we did set some metrics, and it was clear on August 24th that if we got inside those metrics, we could bring back up to 50% of the students in person. So we didn't meet those metrics. We didn't continue the downward trend that we had seen. DHEC has told us that the upswing in the COVID-19 rates across the state is caused by the additional cases in the 19 through 26 age group. So students returning to college may have created some of that. We really don't know that. That's speculative, and we'll have to wait to see what happens. The lifting of the mask ordinance in one of our municipalities and the Labor Day weekend coming up causes us to be a little worried about how soon we'll get inside those metrics. So in the meantime, we have these two extremes of students who are waiting to get in. We have, let me look at the percentages here. As of yesterday, we had 27,740 students who had registered for online learning. That's twice as many students as we ever imagined. It's 4 times as many as originally indicated that that's how they would like to start school. That's half of our student population, 54% of our student population. Whereas in person, we have a total of about 18,500 students wanting in-person instruction. So what we wanted to ask the board's permission to do was to address the inequities or those extremes that are created there. We have the 27,000 students who've registered to attend virtually are disproportionately represented among schools where the children of color and poverty attend. And we're worried about the fact that a lot of those families probably don't feel safe yet sending their children back to school. But we know that when we were in remote last spring, the families were often asking us for some additional supports. So we want to be able to get into those communities and provide supports closer to the homes, hoping that by doing that, we'll be able to create some small learning groups. Sometimes people call these learning pods that would be located near where people live. So children who are already playing together might come together to learn for a tutoring session, a couple of hours a day. Carolyn Belcher and Learning Services will talk a little bit more about that, but we would need permission for our personnel to be engaged in doing that and perhaps even being off-site. We have teachers who have volunteered to do that and would like to do that. The other extreme we have is that in some of our schools, because we thought that we were getting close to being inside the metrics, rather than running a hybrid schedule, we felt we could bring back all of the students in person. We could do that in 50 schools. That worked out just fine. So this conversation doesn't apply to the majority of our schools, but in about 30 schools, we do have students on the wait list to come in person. And so what we would like to talk with you about today is a plan to reorganize a little bit to be able to bring back in person the students who are left on the waiting list. And that would help us address both of those extremes. So that's the context for what we're asking for today. We didn't want to just move forward with that because of the vote that the board took on August 24th about the metrics. We're clearly not ignoring the metrics, but we need to make some movement to get these students worked in person and to serve the students who are wanting to learn inside their own communities, or else it may be quite a while before we can get these adjustments made. So I want to thank Carolyn Belcher, Michelle Simmons, Dr. Joe Williams, the level leaders who work with principals, and those principals and leadership teams at schools who've already been working for several days to make sure that they can address both of these challenges. Carolyn?
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. As many of you know, I'm relatively new to Charleston, and so my professional network is more national, and I talk a lot to my friends across the country who are in similar jobs. And I feel very lucky to work with the board and for a superintendent who have been committed from the very beginning to bringing back as many students as we could in person safely. And that's been sort of our lodestar and where we are. I think one of the things that's made that challenging, though, as I've said to many members of the community, is that has meant that we've had to respond to changes in a way that has meant that sometimes our messages are not heard as quickly as we would want, and that it feels a little reactive. So right now, our current reality is that we have over, as Dr. Postlewaite said, 27,740 kids, which is about 54% of our student population proactively has registered in remote learning, whether in a virtual academy or temporary remote. Now, unfortunately, that does skew, and it's not consistently distributed across our county in terms of which schools are affected by that. So disproportionately, our African-American and Latinx students tend to not want to come back in person, which may make sense given those communities have often been more hurt personally by the virus and have felt its effects, and often may live in multi-generational households and have lots of reasons why this is not the right time. But that does mean we want to make sure that we're making some adjustments. And given our focus up to this point has been primarily on just opening well, we haven't done the investment that we need to make sure that we're creating community supports. Fortunately, we are very lucky to have a lot of community partners, Charleston Promise Neighborhood, Reading Partners, communities and schools that have done some of those thinking for us. Our faith partners have reached out. So we're hopeful that we can actually think about innovative models of creating social community for kids in a safe way where they're having study supports, even if they opt to continue virtual for a longer period of time. And of course, I'm also hopeful because we have such an exceptional operations team who has done such a great job with the plexiglass barriers, with updating the HVAC systems, and making sure that we have disinfectant in every room, that we have the PPE that we need, which again, many districts, that's their limiting factor. It's straight up structural. That is not our situation in Charleston. And that is such a blessing. It's a blessing for the voters who've made sure we had the penny sales tax. And it's a blessing that we have such a talented operations team who've been able to get so much done in such an incredibly short period of time. So our hope is that we will also be able to convince more of those parents to come back and more of those kids to come back as they actually see that we're able to do this safely. But as I keep saying internally, because I'm a little bit of a nervous Nelly, we haven't opened at scale yet, and we won't until Tuesday. And so we want to make sure, Mr. Barowie calls it like a soft opening of a restaurant. We want to make sure we work out the kinks. We're able to do it in a way that's keeping students safe, keeping adults safe, showing that we can get back to the normal feel of school where kids are having fun, where there's teaching and learning, where teachers are not worried about the PPE as the first thing in their head, but about what's holding this child back from understanding this mathematical concept. So that's our goal. I think the good news, as you know, and Dr. Pulsbury sort of highlighted this, right now we're at a point where 13,457, which is about 26% of our population, can come back in person. It is not equally distributed for 25% in each school. We do have some schools like Angel Oak that are bringing back 36% of their capacity, or 36% of their enrollment, or 44% of their safe building capacity. Carolina Park is bringing back 30% of its capacity on September 8th because they think they can do it safely, and they're balancing where they can match teachers. We are lucky that a lot of our teachers are willing to work in person. I think one of their challenges has been just straight up instructional programming, having a good match between a content area that we want to offer and teachers. So we might have all the English teachers who are willing to do it, but not all the math teachers. So how do we balance that? And we haven't made the sacrifice of courses, particularly at our middle school and our high school. We want to offer the same rich academic program as we typically do. Now, I think the good news is in about only 30 schools, so not a majority, but in 30 schools, we do have a waiting list, and that's for about 5,000 students. Precisely 4,973 students were put on a waiting list. Those are students whose parents expressed a preference for in-person instruction and had a confirmed wait list on August 28th. So they had originally said, I want in person, but they were put on the wait list either because of the lottery or something else. So when we,
That number, Carolyn, again, I'm sorry.
4,973, or about 10%. Over the last week, we've spent some time talking to these principals to make sure that we truly understand, like, what exactly would it take? What are the barriers for being able to bring back students in person? How can we work through those barriers? And I think, all throughout this entire process, again, I'm relatively new. I feel very, very fortunate to work with senior leaders like Ms. Simmons and Dr. Williams and the principals whose creativity and innovation has made so much of this possible. I'm going to turn it over to them to give you sort of a highlight on where we are on those 30 schools where we have more student interest than we have available positions at this point in time.
Sure. Thank you, Carolyn. So as both Dr. Postlewaite and Ms. Belcher alluded to, in large part, we've had success in terms of schools and school teams being able to satisfy all of the in-person requests. And I can't say enough, reinforce enough, be more emphatically in saying our principals and their school teams have done a tremendous job organizing, preparing, and getting ready for families and children at large. As we talk with principals about their ability and their capacity to be able to bring more students in where families are requesting it, there are a few challenges that they're working through. some of which include the ability to increase class sizes, the ability to use all certified staff at their disposal, the ability to make sure that we have bus capacity as we increase student capacity that plays into bus capacity, as well as coming up with creative ways to design scheduling, to utilize and maximize our technology needs, and to make sure overall we have a solid plan to make sure that folks are safe and that we can deliver on our instructional designs. So at the elementary level, in large part, the principals initially were able to satisfy all of their requests, but we are still working through a few challenges in a few of our elementary schools where it is really difficult to make sure that everyone can come in, that we adhere to that safe COVID capacity, classroom by classroom. And so those are a couple of the big barriers that we're working to overcome at this time. Dr. Williams?
All right. So great morning, everyone. So I wanted to clarify, Dr. Postlewaite said we have been working several weeks, but we've been, several days. We've been working a few weeks, and then Carolyn did catch that. So, but you know, I've just started letting the grade grow in because I just feel it's healthy now. But seriously, it's been good work. You know, thinking about schools and you know how we can support learning for our scholars. So that's been some good work. So we continue to work with our schools, like Ms. Simmons just said, in helping them, you know, overcome some of those barriers, which are preventing them from bringing back more scholars in person. I want to give you an example of what some of those barriers may be. Like for instance, in a middle school, what we found is that in an effort to bring back the majority of those scholars, all of those scholars on the waiting list, can give you a sixth grade example. As we spoke through a lot of these issues with some of our middle schools, one principal looked at, if I bring back all of my scholars that are on the waiting list in sixth grade in person, I have two teams. I have three teams. I have two four-man teams, which would be 8 teachers. Then I have a 2-man team. I would assign those 2 4-man teams, which would be 8 teachers, to teach all those kids in person. Then what that leaves that 6th grade team with are the 2 teachers. So you still have those scholars that need that temporary remote. So when you do that, the 2 teachers that are teaching a temporary remote now have 65 kids apiece in their classes, which I know you all don't know what the class maximums are, but you know that's not a number that we can work with. So these are some of the conversations that we're continuing to have with schools, and we've been meeting with lots of schools, some of them 5 times already, to help them overcome those barriers. So some of the things we've been working on, Ms. Simmons already mentioned, were like some of the scheduling options, looking at some creative ways to use technology aids to help, you know, minimize those classrooms. Another example for that would be, you know, we could look at staff, for instance, that would be willing to teach during their planning period to help, you know, bring back more scholars for some additional pay. We do also want to reiterate, like I said, Ms. Simmons and Ms. Belcher already said that we're committed to not going over that COVID, you know, classroom safe capacity for each classroom, because it would be different for every classroom because they're different sizes. And overall for the middle and high schools, what we see as challenges are our classes, our courses are more specialized, not like the elementary school where you have an ELA teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, and a social studies teachers. Or in the high school, you have all these different classes that the scholars need to take. So that's what makes it a little more difficult for our levels at the middle and high, is because we have those specialized courses. So, but like we've said numerous times, we're working with our schools because we know this is the good work to, you know, serve all scholars, you know, as best we can. And so we're just thankful and grateful again for our leaders and our teachers and our schools and everything that they're doing to make that possible.
So we do believe that with the creativity and the real hard work of the building level principals, that we're going to be able to bring back all of our elementary school students and our middle school students by September 21st. So that's just, excuse me, that is just a few days after, 2 weeks after we open school. That gives us time again to learn from the first 2 weeks and then slowly bring back more students. I think the thing that's going to be a bit of a challenge is we're going to need, in order to give principals the maximum flexibility that they need to bring those families back, we're going to have be able to allow some student and teacher assignments to change in order to balance out the in-person and online teaching loads. So teachers who aren't comfortable returning to or providing in-person learning by September 21st may have to work with human resources to apply for applicable or eligible leave. So we may ask some teachers who right now their preference is to teach remotely to teach in person, but we also are going to try to balance that. Like, we do have enough teachers across our system who are willing to teach in person. So our hope is that we're going to be able to be creative to make sure that we can accommodate and bring back all those elementary and middle school students by September 21st. Now you'll notice I didn't say high school students. Now, part of the challenge with high school, as many of you know, and with all due respect to the high school students out there listening, is that they're young adults. And so the physical space that's required in a high school to keep the safe distancing is much more challenging. And we have some very large high schools. Obviously, Wando is the best example in our system, which even if we're able to keep safe social distancing within the classroom space, we're not necessarily able to do that within the hallways or other places easily. I know one question that came up a lot for the community was Lucy Beckham. Lucy Beckham specifically, it's a brand new high school, has a lot of space, and it seemed like we weren't bringing back as many students as could be accommodated. I think one of the things that we didn't realize, because our focus has been on building plexiglass barriers to start on September 8th, is plexiglass barriers were only built for the 9th and 10th graders in those classrooms, given those were the students coming back. That meant that the 11th grade and 12th grade spaces have not yet had that build out. That's going to happen right after we open well next week, which creates more opportunities both for Lucy Beckham students as well as for Wando students to have safe social distancing. We're also going to maximize new spaces that we have. So for example, the new CAS, the Cooper River CAS in North Charleston, right across from North Charleston High School, has classroom space, which may be able to be accessed by Academic Magnet or the School of the Arts for additional classroom spaces for them. But given our focus is on starting school well, and frankly, I want principal and teachers to be focused on starting school well, both safely and in a way that feels warm and welcoming after really too long from the classrooms, we need more time on the high school. I think we might be able to do, we'll be able to give an update certainly to the board at September 14th on where we are, but it'll take more time for operations to build out those plexiglass barriers. And I think we also have the option to be a little more creative with scheduling with high schools, given they're more independent. So there is more of an option of an alternating schedule with instructional continuity that's a little different than what we saw for our younger students. So what I mean is, say you're in English class, on Monday and Tuesday, you're reading the novel, you've been assigned to answer questions, you're coming into the classroom discussion about the reading, and you've already done that work. While you're talking with half your class, the other class is now reading the next reading assignment to get ahead, right? I'm oversimplifying to make a point, but that allows us to say that we have more options there. And I think you know this, one of the challenges is that Charleston has a very rich elective program, which means there are a lot of, I'm learning high school terminology as I was not a high school teacher. It's a singleton, so there might be one class in a particular building of a topic. We have not cut that class, but to try to balance out where we might have some students who want remote instruction, some students who want in-person instruction, and the teacher may be in person, but that means he or she is also now trying to accommodate. It's a Rubik's Cube to get to where we want to be. So I want to make sure that you understand that's our priority, but particularly for our larger high schools, we have some physical operations challenges. I want to make sure I've covered everything that's most important. We want to make sure that we're clear with the community, and I mean the broader community, not just our parents and our students. Like, we think it's important to do this well, which is why we're really committed to adhering to the Safe Restart guidelines and all of our safeties, making sure that teacher caseloads are reasonable with appropriate social distancing, because we don't want to be the place where we see the virus increase. We want to make sure that we're keeping our community members, our older folks, whether it's in your own family or not, that they don't feel, where we've seen setbacks, it has been, unfortunately, I think, in that 18 to 25-year gap, as Dr. Postlewaite said, and that may be because not as many high schools are back yet. So we want to make sure we're going slow and steady and that we're doing it in the right way. Dr. Postlewaite, is there anything I neglected to say that would be helpful to highlight? I'd appreciate.
I think those are the highlights.
Okay.
Michelle and Joe. I should thank Jennifer Swearingen, Jeff Beckwith, Trevor Stroderman, and Anita Huggins, who've been out working directly with principals and are probably online, as well as Jeff Barowie, if board members have any questions for him. It would have been easy for us to make one call months ago and stick with it. That call would have had to have been that we would start virtually. We really have enjoyed the fact that the board has tried to be responsive to parents waiting to see what it is parents really wanted to do as school started, and also responsible when it comes to ensuring that we start under the safest possible conditions and making the investments that you've made to make that happen. While we've changed several times to try to respond to what the community wants, we would like to present this plan to you this morning and ask that we try to stick with it for at least 9 weeks. Not that we would lock it down, because things will happen. There will be places where we'll have to make some changes, but we try to implement the recommendations we're making this morning to better serve the children who are learning virtually by getting to them, if their parents are willing to let them get together, and by allowing those almost 5,000 students who are still on the wait list because their parents registered as they should have by the end of August, the opportunity to come back. We think they can be worked in. Even if all of those students are worked in, our district-wide, we would only be returning about 35 to 37% of our total student population. It would be 18,500 students at most, and that's according to today's number. That's not the August cutoff, out of 50,000. So we really appreciate that we've had this opportunity to stay flexible, even though it has been terribly frustrating to parents who weren't sure what their options were going to be, and to teachers who are by nature extraordinarily well organized and like to know their class rosters and subjects they're going to teach in June, because many of them work all summer to plan for that. So this ambiguity has been stressful for everyone. So we'd like to make this, I'll call it our final major adjustment for the first 9 weeks and move forward. And then I want to clarify something that I said the other day that was taken out of context. We were talking about the different phases that we might move through as we're able to use the DHEC metrics. And I said once we had achieved a certain phase, we wouldn't back up. I did not mean to imply that if we had a community outbreak, we wouldn't all go back to virtual learning. What I meant to describe was we wouldn't back up and undo all the class rosters, put children back as if you're rewinding a tape. But certainly, if we have a high number of COVID cases in a classroom, school, or community, we will take absolute appropriate action, including going to virtual for everyone for a period of time in concert with the recommendations that DHEC would make. So those are our recommendations. We tried to summarize them neatly in a proposed motion for you that just sort of puts everything that we're asking for into some bullet points. I'm sorry we didn't get it loaded into board docs, but we really were till late last night working with one another and principals to make sure that what we were recommending reflected exactly the right numbers. So that's the end of our explanation for why we're recommending these changes.
Reverend Mack, I'd like to make a motion.
Hey, Mr. Garrett.
I move to approve expanded services for both online and in-person learning in order to respond to parent preferences, with September 21st as the implementation date. For schools where a majority of students are learning online, engage CCSD personnel to work with nonprofit organizations, faith-based groups, community volunteers, and families to arrange instructional support groups located in those communities where families live. And for in-person request to admit for in-person instruction 5 days per week, all students with August 28th confirmed seating preferences. K-8 students are to return by September 21st. High school students will return as soon as possible, but at least by the first week of October. If there are remaining students on the wait list, they'll be worked in as quickly as safe seating is available. In all instances, the district will adhere to safe restart guidelines, safe seating capacities, and operate within state or district policies when making the necessary adjustments to teacher caseloads and assignments. Teachers uncomfortable with returning to and/or providing in-person learning by September 21st may work with Human Resources to apply for either FFCRA or FMLA, if eligible as applicable.
Second.
Question.
Okay, we're probably moving second by Ms. Darby. I'm going to go down the list for,
Question.
yeah, just 1 second, Mr. Hollenshed. I'm going to go down the list for questions from board members that they may have. Mr. Hollenshed, since you
You
acknowledge,
can start with Cindy first and I come in later.
Mr. Mack, Reverend Mack,
yes, sir.
that's a very long motion. Is there any way that we can put that up on a screen or something so everybody knows
Well-
what that motion was?
Amen.
Well, one of the
Jesus.
things about it, that seemed like that was a prepared statement to read in motion, and we didn't have privilege to that, and that just doesn't seem clean. So anyway, but y'all go ahead. I want to talk after Cindy.
That's fine.
All
As
right,
long as
can
everybody's
we,
clear, as long as everybody's clear on the motion, I'm fine.
Right, so we'll pause for a second
Yeah,
and
get that thing sent out to us.
can we who's there? Who can send that motion to every board member so it can be
Todd's got it up on the screen right now. Reverend Mack.
I can send it. We loaded it into board docs, but we didn't really get all the pieces and parts and make sure we had the details to create the kind of clarity till just a little while ago, but it is in board docs and I will send it right now.
So Todd has it on the screen, and then if you're logged into board docs, and then Dr. Post emailing it.
Thank you, Todd. I see it.
yes. So just so that everyone can be clear. As we enter into discussion about it. So we'll pause for a minute so that that can come through.
Thank you, Dr. Mack, Reverend Mack.
For those of you that have really great eyes, if you can read the one that's swelling up, that'll speed it up even quicker.
So can somebody confirm that what I'm looking at in board docs is exactly what was just proposed, that we're talking about the same language?
So you just received that, Cindy?
I just reloaded board docs and it's here. I just want to make sure that we're talking, that it's this exact same motion, that there
Yes.
aren't any variations.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Todd.
Essentially, it's to address the 4,973 students who are still on waiting list wanting the in-person instruction.
And ensuring, I think, that we are doing all that we can for those students who have prioritized virtual for family health reasons, and so that we're really doing the work that we have a lot of work to do, make sure that we're well serving those kids with our community partners.
Right, so there's really two pieces, that, those two.
And is that motion up on a screen in the boardroom somewhere or for people watching?
It was for a few minutes while Todd had it up. Want to put it back up?
I'm just, as much as we can dictate what we normally do in a board meeting where the motion is up and in, on a screen somewhere.
Yep, got it.
So has every board member received the email either in board docs or the motion? Is there anyone that has not received the motion yet? Mr. Frazier, you have not received it yet? You've got it. Okay, great. Is there anyone that has not received it yet?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to print the motion. Reverend Mack, are we ready to ask questions yet?
I just want to make sure everyone has received it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So let's go down the list asking questions. So just so that we can make sure that we do not monopolize in our questions, I'm going to allow each board member to ask 2 questions at a time, and we go around the circle and we come back. Hopefully some of your questions will will be answered that may be addressed by someone else, but you will get an opportunity to ask all of your questions. Okay.
So, Reverend Mack, before we start the question period, this is too serious of a situation to try to bridle board members' mouth. The decision that you make today and that you take a vote on affects the whole Charleston County. So we cannot gerrymander this situation.
Mr. Hollenshed, if you listen to me very clearly, as I gave instructions, I said all board members will be allowed to ask all of their questions, just so that we do not monopolize the question opportunity. We will allow each board member 2 questions each time around, but you will get a chance to ask all of your questions. So
Thank you, sir.
it's not muzzling anybody. So let's be
Thank
clear.
you.
All right, Ms. Coates.
So I want to make sure that I'm clear. We're talking about, I want to ask my first 2 questions related to the elementary school and the middle school wait list students. And I think I'm correct that we have 4,973. Is that number include the high school? So or is that number just the elementary and middle school kids on the wait list?
That's the full.
I'm sorry?
It's the full wait list, ma'am.
So how many kids roughly are we talking about in terms of elementary and middle school? And so we can have a clear indication, how many kids are we talking about trying to bring back on September 21st? Because you said high school's out. And my second question is, do we have enough teacher and school-based staff to support all of those students coming back with people who are comfortable and currently have said they want to be inside schools teaching? Do we have the staff for that? And how many kids are we talking about in schools?
Forgive me, ma'am, I have breakdowns by individual schools, but not at the division level. So I can't tell you the difference between the high school as well as the middle school. If Ms. Roberts is on the line and you're able to do that calculation, Ms. Roberts, I'd appreciate it. So that we can circle back, because I know I want to be able to give you your answer on how on elementary and middle, unless Dr. Williams or Ms. Sorry, ma'am, we have aggregate data, but not broken out that way. Can you ask the second part of your question again, ma'am?
Sure. So the second part is, of the elementary and middle school students that we are proposing to bring back, do we have enough staff willing to teach inside schools to accommodate them with the current teacher preferences as is? We don't have to ask any more teachers to come back in, or I'm trying to figure out if we have enough staff to accommodate those kids as is.
We do not in each school building. We do across the system. So I think one, we don't want to tie principals' hands. So we do want to make sure that we are saying to teachers that they may have some change in their teacher or student assignments. We may have to be creative too in a place like Simmons Pinckney, where very sadly right now only 5 students want to come back in person. So as someone who lives close to Simmons Pinckney, my goal is to get more folks coming back to Simmons Pinckney. We may need to have a teacher who's willing to teach in person from Simmons Pinckney work at Cario, as a for instance, but that would be something we try to work out on a case-by-case basis. And we don't want to tie the principal's hands. So we are saying in this motion that we would have changes to teacher and student assignments in order to balance out our in-person and online needs. As it is now, we've also are redeploying about 25 central office staff members to accommodate special needs teaching within the virtual academy, and to support our schools so that they're proctors and ways in which we can keep kids separate even as they're being taught by an in-person teacher.
Just because I need to make it very easy, and Reverend Mack, this won't be a question. It just, so that I understand. We have enough staff in the state law and our budget parameters for student to teacher ratio. We have enough staff to teach all of these kids in person, but we have issues that teachers may have to teach in another school in order to accommodate the in-person. Is that a way to say it? They're willing to teach in person, but we may have to say, can you please go to Cario for the first semester because they have more students?
That might be an option. I also think we want principals to be able to try to show over the next 2 weeks that we're able to do it safely, so more teachers will be comfortable coming back safely. our goal here, as much as we can, is we're asking the board for permission to require all the teachers to come back in person if we need them to. Our hope, though, is to work with the teachers so that we can accommodate, because we know across the system we have enough. It's just that we don't necessarily have enough in the right distribution across the system.
Ms. Green?
Excuse me, I want to follow up on Cindy's question with regards to the teachers. So as a part of our motion, we are giving you the okay to mandate that a teacher goes from where they may have been assigned to another school to teach because that's where the need is?
Yes, ma'am. We already have the ability to do that, and we actually do some of that every year. We don't have this kind of challenge every year, but we rebalance teacher assignments based on student enrollment at schools. So it was worth pointing out this year, though, because it's our hope not to force a teacher to teach in person who really is anxious about that and overly fearful. Or obviously, if teachers have conditions themselves, or they're dealing with an illness in the household, they are eligible for certain kinds of leaves. And we have 50-some teachers who've already applied through our HR department for that type of leave. And that's why we pointed out in here that that would still be an option.
Okay, and so
Did you
my
have another
second,
question?
yeah,
ahead.
the second question is, I thought Dr. Postlewaite had said you, Carolyn or someone was going to kind of give us a overview of what these community pods, I'm sure I'm not calling it the right thing, are going to look like, the groups that you're going to be working with in the community. I guess it also, if you could just give me a little bit more information about how that's going to be done, who's going to do it, if we already have problems with teachers in the classroom, how are we adding that to the responsibility of teachers? If somebody could just clarify that a little bit for me, I'd appreciate it.
The goal is not to add anything additional to our teacher responsibility. So our goal, I think, is to recognize that, and ma'am, I think part of our challenge is because we've been so focused on opening well and some of the technical and logistics challenges around scheduling, and as well as the building and facility space, that we had under-attended to this issue. And some of our community partners, frankly, are much further ahead on this in terms of our faith-based partners. And in my head right now is Charleston Promise Neighborhood, who has asked us at least 3 times about this and options. And the way that they're thinking about it is that we know that so much of the challenge of the pandemic has been the isolation and kids being apart from each other. But in families where you have medically vulnerable folks or older relatives who live with you, trying to balance that is very challenging. If you could create a safe space among other families where the children are studying together or doing their online courses. So it's our teacher teaching an online course with the supervision potentially of one of the family members within that group or a community, a volunteer, that might allow us to create more social connection for kids, keep them safer in a smaller environment and in a place that brings confidence. Frankly, this is something I'm hoping that you will hold us accountable to. So in the next few board meetings, we'll be able to come up and show that we've made progress on this. And I will own that I'm hoping we can convince parents by doing this in the right way that their children can come back to school in person so that they can feel more comfortable with that option over the long term as well.
And to just follow up on that, thank you, Carolyn. During the summer, several district office leaders participated in Zoom calls with entire school faculties. The principal had to invite us to do that, but back in July, when we were on the Zoom calls with a couple of different schools, we had this idea came from teachers. I'm really worried about these students whom I don't think will come back in person. And may I please go to the community where they live? Could I find benches to sit outside on days when the weather would allow? and work with these students, teach with them if their parents would allow. So the idea came to us from teachers before we came across the concept of learning pods that has become a common name for these kinds of arrangements. So we absolutely would not ask anyone to go do this who doesn't want to do it, but we have some of our own teachers and some people at the district office, frankly, who would like to organize these groups now in many community agencies. Darren Goss yesterday was in a conversation with Erica about supporting this. We've talked with, in addition to CPN, with a couple other local philanthropies and volunteer groups who are really wanting to try to help organize these kinds of situations. I know at least two faith-based leaders have reached out offering facilities in their churches and offering to help gather the people from their neighborhoods to participate. Is that a helpful description?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll have a follow-up question when we come back to, when he comes back to me, but thank you.
Mr. Hollenshed? Mr. Hollenshed?
Yes, sir. One specific thing with that motion, it's too much in one motion that I believe it needs to be broken up into two motions. The other thing is I'm concerned, Dr. Postlewitz, and my hat goes off to you and the hard work that you're doing. But I've been hearing that that we're not keeping up with the adequate cleaning of the facilities, and that the janitorial services is not up to the task. And so I want to know, from Jeff Baroe, what is going on with the decontamination of the buildings? Because I hear that that's not being done adequately, and our general public needs to know the truth of whatever is happening in that particular area. I do agree with the philosophy of trying to work in that 5,000 students, because that's not a bad number, but I don't think they need to be, I think Ms. Belcher mentioned, and working them in different hours of the day or in a different way. That does not put us a hard bearing on our teachers, but I do not support that motion the way that is written. Thank you.
Mr. Baroe, do you want to respond? First of all, Mr. Holland said we've created a safe restart tip line, and that you can email or call anonymously and report the specifics of anything like that, because these sort of broad statements worry us. We don't know where to look or what might have happened. I would ask Mr. Baroe to respond with the specifics about what we are doing and how we follow through when any oversight is reported to us. Mr. Baroe, are you on the line?
Okay, we'll come back to Jeff once he gets online to answer Mr. Hollenshed's question. Ms. Jeffries?
Can you hear me now?
We can. Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Baroe.
Okay. Sorry about that. So Mr. Hollenshed brings up a great point, because all of the protocols that we've advanced, that the board has supported us on, have not been fully implemented because our students haven't been back yet. So we haven't been, until this week, stepping up the protocols that were established, because again, we haven't opened school yet. So individuals walking into the school might not have seen a difference until this week, when we increased the number of hours for our day porters and hired additional day porters. All of those day porters now have guidelines that they can carry with them in their pocket to follow along with their daily routines to make sure they don't miss areas. But our goal, again, is to disinfect common spaces in the hallways and all bathrooms twice a day, which is one more time than we normally do. We now have the disinfecting foggers that have just started to be implemented in our schools. We have one for every building, and we'll be doing 20% each evening within our schools, as well as if we have any additional COVID cases, we do additional cleaning related to that. We've got additional disinfection lined up for the buses, which again, because school hasn't started, that process hasn't begun yet. So I think the biggest issue is that we haven't, nobody has really seen these changes because we haven't started school yet. If there is an issue, as pointed out by Dr. Postlewaite, this Safe Line is going to be an outstanding way for individuals who think something is wrong to report it anonymously, and we will react accordingly. We've also got real good communications with our principals if they identify a flaw in our execution. And we hope that when school opens next week, they will see the noticeable difference, but we are prepared to react if there are any issues.
Thank you, Mr. Broy. And Reverend Mack, the other thing, and I'm done. You know, that motion, again, I state needs to be broken up. One deals with virtual and one deals with bringing children back. I wish that we can separate that motion. I'm sorry, my Zoom blinked out. You can still hear me. I wish that we can separate that motion and be more transparent for the public.
Okay, so that motion has been made and has been seconded. So we are in discussion of that motion right now. If that motion fails, then there's an opportunity for a new motion, but that is the motion on the floor right now.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Reverend Mack,
Yes, sir.
Move to amend the motion.
that is true unless he's trying to amend the motion. If he's wanting to make an amendment, this is his time to do so.
Okay, all right.
Well, I'll make that motion to amend it.
You have to be more specific than that, Mr. Hollinger.
I'm sorry, to make the motion to bring, to expand the virtual component. And I don't have his motion in front of me to read, but in the other one, I would like to separate the issue of bringing kids back to school.
Okay, is there any second to that motion?
I second it.
I'm sorry?
I second it.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mack, Reverend Mack, you got a motion to amend and a second. Would you take the votes on that motion?
I don't understand the motion.
I don't either.
Well, Cindy.
I mean, no, I mean, I understand what you're wanting to do, but I need to know the words of your motion, like you said, for transparency. I understand what you're doing, and I want you to put it into a transparent motion that everybody can see or know what you're exactly asking. So that I understand it, but can you tell us, I mean, can you create the motion? Can you create the verbiage?
I got you, Cindy, but I don't have this motion in front of me. And as I was explaining, that motion was dropped on us at the last moment. And it's just too much at one time. And that was a prepared motion. And I don't agree with everything being bungled up. So I'm trying to work with it being remotely away from the district office. If I had the motion ahead of time, I would have created a proper motion.
Okay, can you pull up your board docs and create a motion?
I got a blank screen.
Matt, would you take
I'm trying to repair this.
Just 1 second.
Reverend Mack,
Just 1 second.
I don't support this motion, but I think I've got it in front of me. So I think what Mr. Hollingshed is trying to do is he wants to separate out for schools where a majority of students are learning online, engage CCSD personnel to work with nonprofit organizations, faith-based groups, community volunteers, and families to arrange instructional support groups located in communities where families live, and separate that out from the rest of the motion. Is that correct, Mr.
Is that accurate,
Yes,
Mr.
ma'am.
Hollingshed?
Yes, Kate.
Does everyone understand that motion that has amendment that was made and seconded by Reverend Collins? Does everyone understand that motion? That amendment?
Reverend Mack.
All right, so let's.
Reverend Mack.
Yeah, just 1 second, Reverend Collins.
So you're asking, Kevin, that we vote on that motion up or down, and then the other stuff we vote on up or down?
Yes,
That
ma'am.
you'd be allowed to make 2 votes.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I'm sorry. He can
Mr.
amend, we have a motion on the floor. He can amend the original motion, that's it. Not make 2 motions. He can, if he wants to amend the motion or he wants to make another motion, that's fine. But that's where we are. We need to either to ask for a friendly amendment, or he needs to make his own amendment and vote it up or down, and then we go back to the original motion.
Okay. All right. Is everyone clear on the amendment that has been made by Mr. Hollenshed, second by Reverend Collins? Is everyone clear on that amendment?
Not exactly clear.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's your question, Ms. Green.
Well, can somebody read, can you read it again, please?
So what Mr. Hollenshed is suggesting is that we pull out and have separate the 4 schools where a majority of students are learning online, engage CCSD personnel to work with nonprofit organizations, faith-based groups, community volunteers, and families to arrange instructional support groups located in communities where families live. So he wants to separate that be one motion, and the other that Todd read earlier be a separate motion.
So Mr. Hollenshed, are you just bifurcating the original motion and want to vote on them separately? Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So he's not adding anything, Reverend Mack. He wants to bifurcate the motion. And if y'all can second that, y'all can agree to that up or down.
Okay. All right. So what we're voting on right now is this amendment that Mr. Hollenshed is asking to separate from the original stated motion that was already moved in second. But with this amendment that has been moved by Mr. Hollenshed, second by Reverend Collins, we need to, in the separation of the two, that's what we need to vote on to move forward, correct?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to vote on that right now, board members. Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
For now, I'm going to vote no, and we can come back to that after we've done our discussions. But I want to just keep going with the discussion.
Ms. Green?
I vote no. I just want to make sure that the original motion is very clear to anybody that's understanding it, but I vote no for right now.
Got it. Mr. Hollenshed?
Yes.
Ms. Jeffries?
I vote no, not because I don't really, I agree with the original motion, and so that's the reason why.
Okay. Mr. Garrett?
No.
Mr. Frazier?
No.
Reverend Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Darby?
No.
And I vote no, that motion, that amendment fails. Ms. Jeffries, your question on the original motion that was made and seconded.
Sorry, I'm outside and there's all kinds of noises. Do you want to come? Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I've actually had a couple of conversations about this with Ms. Belcher. And so all of my questions have been answered by her. I support the motion because I know a lot of work has gone behind it. And I want to especially say that I love the idea of the learning pods. And that's something that I'd like to see ongoing, even after kids go back to school.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Garrett, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Frazier?
I'll try and make them questions. First, I want to make sure I understand that we've done everything that we can to make our buildings safe for faculty and students to return. And so we keep hearing percentages. Either we've made them safe or we haven't. So I'm hoping what this is doing is saying safe capacity is our COVID capacity, where we maintain the protocols and the distances. And that's the only limitation on our ability to accept students. So that's sort of a question.
Yes, sir, that's correct. We're not asking at all to make any modifications to those safe seating capacity numbers and percentages that were established by facilities in conjunction with MUSC and DHEC advice.
Okay.
So we will no longer have this artificial 25% limit, because that was a different limit.
That's exactly right. That created a lot of confusion. We're talking about the safe seating capacity per classroom in school.
Okay, thank you. You talked about this being, I'm going to use the word, the final amendment to our plan for 9 weeks. If a parent who presently is temporary remote in 3 weeks determines that they are confident that in fact our school buildings are safe and they would like to have their child resume in-person instruction, do they have that option?
The phrase in the motion that says if there are remaining students on the wait list, they'll be worked in as quickly and as quickly as safe seating is available is intended to allow that flexibility. If there's a seat available that's within capacity and it doesn't overload a teacher's classroom according to the guidelines that are established by the district, by the board and state, then yes. But those guidelines have to comport with the safe seating capacity.
And I just for point of clarification, so that would be a student who was not on the August 28th list, not in the 5,000. That's student number 5,001 who raises their hand. Family says, I'm comfortable. This looks good. I want to come back in. Am I clear about that?
Yes, sir. Actually, the 5,000 includes all the students who, as of last night, had asked to come back. So that number is greater than the August 28th list. And that could go up a little bit, but yes, sir. So if 3,000 more want to get on the wait list, they could, but we are not going to exceed the safe seating capacity or.
Got it.
You got it.
I'm good. I just,
yeah.
Capacity's limitation is what we've got built into the system now as safe. And I don't want to prevent anybody that becomes more confident that we've done it right from getting back in the classroom. And I think you've answered that. So thank you.
Yes, just clarification, Dr. Postlewaite. I believe the 4,973 is those students that were listed as of September 1st. So when Wando let their group know. So there are some families who are expressing interest now, like yesterday, which would have been September 3rd, which are not reflected necessarily in that number.
Okay, September 1st.
Sorry.
Thank you.
That number could be 7,000 next week. We don't know, but as long as we've got safe capacity, we'll accept them.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Garrett?
No questions. I'm ready to vote whenever, but.
Okay. Reverend Collins?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so Dr. Postlewaite, normally is a motion is a specific action to do something or not do something. So when I see this motion come out today, after reviewing the agenda, this motion here, this plan that's really in this motion wasn't revealed to us. So we didn't have a chance to just look at this writing. No, I wasn't privy to it. Priscilla said she saw it, she knew about it. I guess Todd knew about it, he has the motion, but for us, rest of us board members, we don't have any idea. When we come to a meeting, we're looking at a whole new plan to be rolled out. I mean, I commend the efforts of trying to get kids back in school, but it makes it hard to digest and for the public to digest it also, but no one is prepared for it. So basically this motion is not really a motion, it's a plan. And I would much rather the motion that said, well, the motion to approve the district plan, safe restart plan, the amended plan rather, that'd have been much more acceptable than to give us the plan in a motion today that we weren't privy to. So my first question is this. You said K through 8, all K through 8 be in school by September 21. Am I understanding that right? All students, kindergarten, 8th grade, would return to school for in-person learning by 21? September
Only
21?
the ones who are on the wait list.
All the ones on the wait list.
Let Dr. Postlewaite or Ms. Belcher answer, please.
Just those who wanted to come back in person, they indicated they wanted to come back. They registered in time, but because the school was still going on a July 27th vote that the board took that said try not to go over 25%, the school set the limit at 25%, and then we did a randomized lottery. So it left some students out who didn't to come in. So this is just the students who were on that randomized lottery that occurred in accordance with the vote you took July 27th. And then Reverend Collins, on August 10th, the board took a vote that said we could go above the 25%. You've given us permission
Right.
all of this. We're just, the new thing in the motion today actually is primarily about the learning pods out in the communities. And everything else is simply clarifying that your August 24th vote was around the metrics, which we haven't met. That would have allowed us to bring back 50% of the students, but we're not at that point. So we're asking permission not to go to 50% because we haven't met the metrics, but to go back and pick up those students who were inadvertently left on the waiting list because some schools were still implementing around the board's vote from July 27th, which you overturned on August 10th.
Right, absolutely. So let me ask you this. So by allowing more K through 8 kids to come to school by September 2021, the ones that want to come to school for in-person instruction, does that mean that you'll have to demand that our teachers return to in-person instruction? Also, the ones that maybe opt out of in-person and wanted to do it virtual, will they then be demanded by the district to come in to do instruction in person to meet the growing number of kids in-person instruction?
We have some teachers who are in 3 different groups. There are teachers who clearly have conditions, pre-existing conditions, fragile family members, childcare issues, and they qualify under the CARES Act to have a specified amount of leave in order to be able to take care of those children. We had some teachers who were reluctant to teach students in person, but who are feeling a little more comfortable about that. We have some teachers who have always been just fine coming back and teaching students in person. I think demand is a really strong word. We would like to try to be able to work with our faculty, but to be clear, if you have students who are being taught remotely, when those students come into school in person, someone has to come with them to teach them. The information we have leads us to believe that we, in most instances, in at least 90% of our schools, based on the information we have, we think that can be fairly easily worked out. There may be a certification area or two where we need to ask a teacher to come in to teach students in person, where in the case where the teacher might have rather have taught virtually. This is a challenge that every district that's trying to operate in person and virtually has. And at the end of the day, we don't want to force people to come in. We want to work with them and give them some sort of leave, even if it's an unpaid leave of absence. And we have a few teachers who've done that. So the answer to your question is there will be some teachers who will need to come in and teach in person who are not currently teaching in person. We hope to be able to work with those who are willing to come back so that we can make some transfers among schools to make this work out perfectly. I can't guarantee you that there won't be some times where teachers will have to make a tough decision, come back to teach in person or go to HR and ask for a leave.
Thank you. That's as I read the motion that came in the email a while ago, that's what I gathered, that the teachers wouldn't have much of a choice, that if the district deems that her services are needed in person, and she would have to come or take a leave of absence. I want to bring that out so we all understand that it really wouldn't be much of an option at that point. I want to move to something else that you just spoke about.
Reverend Collins, Reverend Collins,
Yes, sir.
Reverend Collins, you already asked your 2 questions. We'll come back to you if you can just hold that right there for me.
Okay. Oh, I thought you went around everybody already. You said we're finished.
Yeah, we're going to come back. All right.
All right.
Yeah, Ms. Coates. Do you have any finalized questions?
Well, so just to clarify, because, as you can imagine, our phones are blowing up right now. People are just, and it's all over the place on topics we're not actually talking about. And then some of it is. So I just need a simple answer, as close to yes or no as we can get. Does bringing back the elementary and middle school students currently on those wait lists go outside the district's metrics for having those students inside schools? We have a set of metrics. If we bring those kids back, have we overturned those metrics?
No, ma'am, absolutely not. Not in terms, if a teacher's classroom safely seats 16 students, we would not ask for any more than 16 students to be in that classroom. If a school's capacity, a safe capacity that's already been reported to the board, that was cleared by the work that facilities did in conjunction with the medical experts, was listed at 450, we will not exceed that capacity. That's why Ms. Belcher indicated that the answer is unequivocally yes, we are staying inside those capacities. Unequivocally no, we are not exceeding them. That's why Ms. Belcher said we may need some extra time with particularly 3 high schools where we think the number of students wanting to come back really pushes the building capacity.
Right, and for clarity, let's just stay out of the high schools because I get you, we'll have to have that conversation. So we're really, and that's the thing, I'm getting all these questions about high schools, and they're, to my understanding of what I'm looking at, this isn't discussing anything about the high schools. Am I correct on that? We're talking about the elementary and middle school wait list, and we're talking about learning pods.
We're talking about the elementary and middle school wait list by September 21, and we're talking about trying to work at the high school level. I think we have 4 high schools out of 14 where it might be 5 where we still have students on wait lists. I think the issues have been worked out in all but 3 of those high schools, but they're asking to wait till October, to have until October 1, not necessarily to wait until then, to work around all the issues.
So this motion gives, is a marching order that allows high schools to bring back more students by October 1st, as well as the elementary and middle school kids by September 21st. That are on waiting list today. We're not talking about kids in the district or even kids, just the ones that are on the waiting list.
The ones who were on the waiting list and confirmed by the deadline when they were supposed to apply by August 28th. We're not even guaranteeing that we can get people who called yesterday in. We're simply asking for those. We asked parents for a choice. They told us their choice. We locked that down. We sent the parents a seating option. They were to confirm by August 28th. We're talking about those parents with whom we entered into an agreement and through the fluke of the lottery did not get a safe seat.
Okay, I think you're saying the ones who are on that wait list, and we are including that you have high school students that we will probably be able to bring back by early October, and Ms. Belcher, correct me if I'm wrong, and that is embedded in this motion, that we are allowing ultimately all 4,973 kids, that's what we're talking about, is 4,973 kids who wanted to be in person, who are on wait list. We're looking to accommodate those 4,973. We're not opening up the schools or for more. Is that correct?
That's what's in this motion. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I will say, ma'am, of course, I'm trying to get some schools where we can convince more kids to come back, particularly in communities I know that you have a big investment in. But that's not
right.
part. Yeah.
And absolutely. And those are schools that, I mean, we have that have like 11% of their population wants to be back. We're not talking about that because we've got 89% that do not want to be back. That's getting them to believe that we can safely educate them.
That's right.
But we're talking about 4,973 kids who want to be in school in person, who have been put on a wait list, and we're trying to accommodate them. Because everybody is getting kind of all over the place when the reality is we're talking about 4,973 kids who are on waiting list. How they got there, fine, they're on that list. And then we can worry and focus and expand services. So I just wanted to make sure that that's, and bringing those kids back will not violate our safety protocols for spacing that we set up with our metrics. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Green, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. What impact, if any, will decline in the COVID numbers have on the plan?
So a decline in the COVID numbers as described to the board on August 24th, and the metrics that were adopted by the board on August 24th would permit 50% of the students of the total student population. So if our normal student population is around 50,000, that would automatically permit 50% of 25,000 of the 50,000 to return in person. We didn't meet those metrics, and that's why we're not asking to admit students beyond today, because we know we have 18,700 on the list, and that's below what the board approved if we get inside those metrics. So short answer, if we get inside the metrics, it automatically triggers permission for 50% of the student population to return in person. Again, always inside those safe restart school capacities.
And what about an increase?
If an increase occurs in the COVID-19 rates, the advice we were given yesterday at the state superintendent's meeting was to look at increases community by community and school by school. So the guidance actually says if you have high spread in the community and high spread in the school. And because we haven't had schools open, we haven't really looked at the part of the recommendation that says you have to have both of those factors. We don't have high spread in any school right now, so technically we're not outside the guidelines, but we set our metrics in a way that, or the board set the metrics in a way that the board felt was safe. So in that instance, Ms. Green, we look at school by school or classroom by classroom, and then you look at a feeder pattern, who was on a bus, how many kids were infected, and that's why the contact tracing that's done by our nurses, we currently have 104 nurses, all of whom will be trained to do the contact tracing, and they can complete that very, very rapidly so that we can know exactly where we stand by the end of one day, within 24 hours. Does that address your question sufficiently?
Yes, thank you. And not another question, Mr. Mack, but I would like to see those numbers also that Cindy asked for in terms of how many total high school kids that we're talking about. So if y'all could just maybe send that to us.
Ms. Roberts is working on it now. We may have it before the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
and if we don't, if we can make sure that each board member gets that breakdown information.
Thank you.
Reverend Mack.
Mr. Holland, I'm sorry, Mr. Hollenshed.
Yeah, quick question. So you're
So
going to
you're-
give us the breakdown of that waiting list for like Stall and North Charleston and Wando and West Ashley, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing was that waiting list was deprived from the metric safety measures, correct?
Yes, sir. It was first of all, there was a parent survey, and we realized from that, well, there have been multiple parent surveys. Then there was a confirm your registration. So these numbers come from the time when parents confirmed their registration, and none of the registration requests were outside of the safety guidelines. So yes, they're all within the safety guidelines. When schools made determinations about how many children they could safely bring back to just test the protocols the first 2 weeks, they had varying percentages at each school, but none of them went outside the safety guidelines.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Reverend
Ms. Jeffers, you have a follow-up
Yeah, I just
question?
have a point of clarification. It was said that I have never seen the motion until it was introduced today. Just to say that I had talked to Ms. Belcher. She and I work together on I'm the chair of the Strategic Education Committee. So
Thank
we've
you.
been working
Exactly.
on this plan for months, and that's how I was informed before this meeting as to what the plan was. But I had never seen the motion before.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Garrett, do you have any follow-up question?
We didn't really understand that question, Reverend Mack.
Mr. Garrett, did you have any follow-up questions?
I don't think he does. He's on by phone.
Okay, Mr. Frazier, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, I'm done. I'm ready to vote.
Okay, Reverend Collins, do you have any follow-up question?
Yes, sir. I got just a little bit more. And I'd ask it right now. I just want to make sure I understand Dr. Postlewaite. August 20, the kids that signed up for in-person by August 28th, that was the plan, saying that those kids will be in by September 21st.
Yes,
Am I
sir.
reading it right? The second bullet on your motion?
Yes, sir. And if there's room for the schools to bring in, or as there's room for schools to bring in the students who are signing up for in-person after August 28th, the students will be admitted too. But we currently have some students whose parents have received a letter saying they're on the wait list because of a randomized lottery. And it's those students we're giving first priority to seat, because they're totally left out of any opportunity to have face-to-face, which is the preference that they asked for. However, if a school has room and other parents are coming and wanting to enroll their children in person, we'd be very happy for that to happen. We think we've created safe conditions, and we honestly believe the better option for children is to be in schools if their parents are comfortable with that.
But the requirement is that they sign up by August 28th. Is that the requirement?
Those who signed up by August 28th are on a wait list, Colin. Some schools still have plenty of parents who signed up their children after the 28th. And that these wait lists exist in some schools in every.
All right.
Collins, did you have another question?
We don't have the best audio. Maybe. Yes, sir. You spoke about using nonprofit, faith-based community groups to work with the school district or help with educating the kids. But I don't have any details or really understand what you really have in mind. How will a church, for example, work with the school district? What do you have in mind, or how will a nonprofit work with the school district? What are the plans and the details of that? And will that be of any cost to the school?
What we're asking permission for is to work with nonprofit or faith-based groups to bring back a plan that would serve students. We do not anticipate it will cost anything, but we do need permission. If we have someone right now who is responsible for tallying sheets and submitting them to the State Department, who says, I would really like, instead of this work that I've been assigned to, I really would like to work together, the nonprofit and faith-based people together, and use some of my time to get this started. And then if we have teachers who are willing to go into a church area, perhaps an outside covered shelter, to teach children closer to their homes, this gives us permission to do that planning, Reverend Collins. It's that part of the request is not a plan. It's simply acknowledgement that with 20,000 students signed, almost 28,000 students for virtual learning, knowing the learning loss that occurs on virtual learning, we feel as though we have a desire. We know we have a desire and responsibility to provide better support for children in some of our communities who are not well supported when they're learning virtually. So it's just getting your permission to proceed so that you won't hear we've been out talking with a church in your neighborhood or with Metanoia about some sort of collaborative plan, or with Charleston Promise Neighborhood, or a synagogue near you, and not understand what's happening as a board member. So it is for information and for permission to proceed with planning.
I call the question.
Just a minute, I'm almost finished. Max said we could ask all our questions. And I'm almost done. So Dr. Postlewaite, you also, I guess your plan would come back to the board then, right? Once you get something in place, you would notify the board or advise us what's going on in the community.
Yes, you may not have been on the line when Ms. Belcher explained that. Ms. Belcher, if you want to repeat that again.
Yes.
No,
sir.
that's okay. No, that's okay. She doesn't have to repeat that again. That's okay. But this one of my last question, I think, is this. You mentioned about using the North Charleston Center for Advanced Studies for academic magnet students, SOA students, to get additional space. And so I don't oppose that, but what I do recommend is that if we're going to open that space up for students to come in, that's not just limited to those two schools, but let's make it available to whosoever needs space. They all can use that space, that we're not showing favoritism to any particular schools, but we open up to anybody that needs space, that we can offer classroom space to anybody, any of our schools that need space, not just those two schools. I think that'd be fair to everybody.
I think the challenge is those to have more of a limited safe building capacity. So North Charleston is obviously across the street from CAS, but that building capacity allows us to keep social distancing for the number of students that we have. So that's why I mentioned School of the Arts and academic ag and specifically, because the number of people puts us right at the limit of this building capacity. And we're trying to be creative on how we make sure we can serve those students in person.
Well, I understand. I know it was good intentions. I'm not against that. I'm gonna say we have to make sure we don't want to look at showing favoritism to one or two schools, make it open to everybody.
Reverend
Well,
Matt.
I also, but I want to make sure that in hearing what Chris says, we don't start busing children across the county to get to a space. I get a little hanky when you say open it up to everybody so we don't show favoritism. I don't think it's fair that, I think we ought to try to accommodate the kids as close to the school they attend as possible. And I don't want the board to get a mixed message from that.
We're having some audio problems.
Right.
Could you please be recognized by the chair before we speak?
Yep. All right. Well, the question has been called.
Reverend Matt.
Mr. Hollenshed.
One question. You can call for the question, but I just want to make sure, Dr. Postwood, when you take this vote, that we're not violating our point system that we approved a month ago, or 30 days ago.
Okay. All right. So let me just, board members, thank you so much for, well, first of all, let me thank staff for the presentation on today and the hard work that has went in trying to get us to a safe start in opening up our schools, making it safe for everyone. Thank you to the staff. Board members, I want to thank you for your questions on today and making sure that we're all working toward the same goal, and that make sure that we restart school in a safe manner for everyone. So your questions today were duly noted and on task and asking to make sure that we're all on the same page. So thank you so much for that. The motion has been made by Mr. Garrett and second by Ms. Darby. And we are now ready and prepared to vote. And I will call each individual board member by name, and you can cast your vote yes or no. All right, Ms. Coates, how do you vote?
I vote yes if the district can commit to giving us some specific information as soon as possible. We've got 30 schools we're talking about, and we're getting 10,000 emails and text messages. Clearly, 7,000 of those people aren't affected by this decision. So I will vote yes, but ask that we please get some specifics as soon as possible.
Okay, Ms. Green, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Hollenshed, how do you vote?
Again, I vote no for the reason, Reverend Matt, that this was dropped on us at the last moment for the motion. I support the ideal, but I do not like, that should have been two motions.
Okay, Ms. Jeffries, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Thank you. Reverend Collins? Reverend Collins?
Okay, yes, sir.
You vote yes?
I would vote yes, but I can't vote yes today because the public didn't see the plans, and we didn't have a discussion about the plans. Which this motion to me is just a plan. It's not really a motion, and plans can't be a motion. So therefore, I have to vote no. I think this needs a legal review. I don't see it as being a real motion, so I vote no.
Thank you, Ms. Darby.
Well, since everybody else has put their words in, I vote yes, because we're bringing back the 4,973 kids that have asked for face-to-face instruction. We're not bringing back any kids on the 8th, 21st, or the beginning of October who haven't asked to come back, and we're doing it all within the safe seating capacity. So I vote yes. Thank you.
Okay. And I will cast my vote as a yes. I believe that we have sufficiently made a plan and executed a plan that will give a safe start to our school system and to our learning environment. And a lot of time and energy has been put into making sure that this is as safe as possible. And as we move forward, I believe that we will make the necessary adjustments that are needed. So I cast my vote as yes. This motion carries 7-2 in favor of the motion has been made.
Reverend Mack.
Yes.
Reverend Collins, and I think it deserves to be asked, is he made a legal challenge? He said at the very end of his statement that he thought that the way the motion was phrased and worded probably needed to be checked out legally. And he's a board member requesting that. I think that's why we have a parliamentarian and it's why we have an attorney. Can they weigh in to specifically his question, was this a legally written motion?
Mr. Mazik?
Yeah, this, I don't know what, you know, he said this is an illegal motion without any preference on what's illegal about the motion. This motion is tying into a plan that you had already authorized with some metrics, asking you to now allow you to bring some kids off the waiting list that's still within something that the board authorized and been unanimous by the board. I'm not unanimous, but majority. I don't know what the vote says, but I don't see any like illegality to this motion.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mazik, for that clarification. Board members, again, thank you so much for your time. This concludes, and we have exhausted our agenda set for today. I entertain a motion for an adjournment.
Bye, everybody.
This
Bye.
meeting is now adjourned. Everyone have a great day. Priscilla, it was great seeing you.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone, for all your hard work. I wish you
Yes.
and I wish, please use me as a free consultant service if you would like to from now on.
Will do.
Bye,
Now
y'all.
I'm going to
Thank
go
you.
see my 2 little grandchildren who are waiting for me to get off this call. So,
All right.
oh, and
have
I
a good
sold
one.
my house 34 minutes ago. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome.
Bye,
Great.
Charles.
Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Reverend Mack,
Yes.
I know the meeting is adjourned. I want to clarify one thing that was a question that was asked about the vote that the board took on August 24th. The motion that the board took on August 24th was to support the plan that we had presented, and it leaves a lot of ambiguity. That's why we tried to really be clear about what this motion entailed. That on August 24th, the board voted that while the district's in phase 1 in terms of the metrics, the board sets the guidelines. And that's why this motion is this detailed, because we are still in phase 1 and the board vote set the guidelines that we would follow in phase 1. We are doing precisely what the plan calls for us to do. So I just want to clarify that for you and Mrs. Harvey in case you get questions about that.
All right. Thank you so much for that clarification. Again, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.